Good morning, class. Welcome to lesson 6 of the Politically Incorrect Jesus by Joe Battaglia. We ended last week with the words of Corrie ten Boom. Don't hold on to anything so tightly that Jesus can't take it from you. And Joe added he may have need of it someday. Today we're going to look at the shape of sin to begin with. And it all started in the garden. Sin, that is. Yeah. It's that simple, old-fashioned way of looking at the world and why humankind acts the way it does. Actually, the word sin is derived from an old English term that was used to mark the distance from the center of the bullseye in archery terms. So it's basically missing the mark. A lot of us miss the mark on a number of things in life. And some of it may be sin. That's our predisposition and our human nature to do something outside of the laws of God. Or we could call it going our own way. However, we like to define it. When we look back to the garden account, how man reacted when he first sinned is telling. As told in Genesis chapter 3, Eve eats fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and with a little encouragement from the serpent, the first act of rebellion enters the human race. What's interesting about that is Adam and Eve first became aware of their nakedness only after they ate the fruit. What happened? Could it be that some knowledge was revealed to them that had not been known previously? Self-awareness was now introduced into the world. Self-awareness allows us to acknowledge ourselves, which is healthy, until self-awareness leads to self-importance, which leads to self-reliance, which leads us away from the Creator. Adam and Eve knew something was different, so they did the only thing they could think to do. They gathered what they could find, fig leaves, and managed to sew them together in an attempt to cover their nakedness. But their new self-awareness also revealed to them something new as well, their sin. Scripture says that God found them hiding and made their first clothes as a way of covering them. That's in verse 21. That was quite symbolic. God was covering their shame, which was lying to him, and had nothing to do with them being naked. We've been covering up for our shame ever since. God first covered man with the skins of animals after the first sin, and then ultimately covered their sin by the person of Jesus. And here is where we find the interesting disconnect of political correctness and what Jesus taught. Whether one actually believes in the literal garden account and that a real Adam and Eve walked the earth is really not the issue. PC thought would question biblical authority and historicity and the notion of absolute truth. It would also say that there's really no sin because to acknowledge sin, you have to acknowledge a moral code that gives definition of right and wrong and meaning to an action or thought. There has to be a bullseye that we miss. PC thought says there really is no bullseye because there is no one absolute moral code. Society becomes the progenitor of its own moral code to know where the line is between right and wrong. But then whose moral code or morality do we use as the measure throughout history? That of communist China, the former apartheid regime in South Africa, openly racist America of just a few years ago, socialist Europe. A moral code is rules driven. It has no power or life in and of itself to prevent someone from sinning. It merely provides a good mirror to reflect in and observe right and wrong. So along comes Jesus and provides a different twist on the Adam and Eve story and sin. Jesus loved people, but never tolerated their sin. There was always a distinction. The woman caught in adultery is a classic example. Let's look at that illustration in John 8, 1 through 11.
But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn he appeared in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap, in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin."
Fast forward now to our current culture. Today, Jesus still speaks out against sin, while political correctness defends it or denies its very existence. We now tolerate both the sin and the sinner, and go even one step further. We celebrate and even lionize those individuals, along with their actions and attitudes, whose celebrity is their sin. It becomes their entree to a politically correct world. We give them reality television shows and hold them up as celebrities for missing the mark of God's love for them. Interestingly, the one thing we should ask ourselves when we see someone or a group acting in such a fundamentally coarse and embarrassing way is, where is their shame? But we have to realize a most obvious response. While Adam and Eve hid from God because of their shame, today we've come full circle as a society that celebrates shame above virtue. The more we reject God's coverings, the further we leave behind God's grace, and the more shameful we will become. And the more we will want to hide from God. Our society is paying the price for hiding from God. Though we will not admit it, we try to cover ourselves up with drugs, dishonest relationships, or even success. You name it. But in the end, God peeks through the bushes to look at our fig leaf covering and says, "Did you think you could hide from me?" John 8, 1 through 11, which we just looked at, tells the story of a woman caught in the act of adultery when she was deposited in front of Jesus by her accusers. Did he lambast her or for her sins? No. He simply started writing on the ground with his finger and made a statement that drove away her accusers one by one. If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. After her accusers melted away, Jesus talked with the woman. Bear in mind, he didn't yell at her. He talked with her and told her, "Go now and leave your life of sin." A simple but powerful statement that transformed her life. When those in the church say similar things, though, in what spirit do we say them? With a judging spirit, or with the loving, forgiving, but not putting up with the sin spirit that Jesus has exhibited toward the woman caught in adultery? The world must sense that the spirit in which that phrase is spoken overrides the church's often unbending measuring stick of biblical self-righteousness. The world must sense that the spirit in which that phrase is spoken overrides the church's often unbending measuring stick of biblical self-righteousness. In other words, our lines in the sand must speak quietly for themselves so that Christ's love is always more evident to the world than his doctrine. Christ came to once again be covering from God for our rebellion, our sin. We can accept that and find peace, or we can hide from him and spend our time and energy going from one bush to another in our own fig leaf clothing, hoping that God will not see us. It's time to come out from hiding and to enjoy the peace that Jesus promises. John 14:27.
Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid.
We're going to pivot now and talk a little bit about some cows. I don't know about y'all. I know the guys, most of the guys our age, loved Westerns when we were growing up. I mean, Saturday morning was the time. Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and Hopalong Cassidy and the Lone Ranger, and it was time to watch what came out of the Warner Brothers studio. Western movies were good too. If it had John Wayne in it, we had to see it. A lot of action and adventure. And inevitably, in most of the Westerns, you could probably count on seeing cattle in the movie. And if there were cattle, there would probably be a stampede at some point. Something would spook the cows, possibly rustlers, howling coyotes, a gunshot, thunder and lightning, you name it. Anything works. Wouldn't take too much to get those cows running toward nowhere. Inevitably, someone would get caught in the middle of the stampede and lose their life. Wagons would be toppled, some of the cows might be killed. It was a mess. Funny how all the cows would be down for the night, resting peacefully, and then all of a sudden, from nowhere, the stampede would begin. It only took a few cows to get them all going. Then the whole herd would follow. thousands of cows running wildly in all directions. Imagine, it only took a few to start all that damage. Can you picture one cow turning to another and asking, "Where are we going in such a rush?" "I don't know," replied the second cow. "I'm just following the guy up there. It must be important, otherwise we wouldn't be running so fast, right?" Well, we don't see too many of those old movies anymore, but life in the church can easily resemble a Western sometimes. We have in our midst professional stampeders who will bolt when frightened and get others to follow them blindly. They create a fuss that affects everyone around them. Unfortunately, the church can also have its own politically correct agenda. So it's only fair to look inward on this one. Let me mention to you that this analogy that Joe presents about cows shows that he grew up in New Jersey and he knows very little about cows. Okay, he calls them he all throughout here. I can't call a cow he. A bull's a he. So I will say she, but bear in mind that also encompasses us men. There are three types of stampeders. One of them is the sacred cow. The sacred cow is a strange animal. It's been around forever and has the respect of the herd for a number of reasons. She's always known exactly the right trail to follow and find food and water for other cows, so many of the cows trust her. That's reassuring. The sacred cow also stands as a symbol of what the herd has been through and survived. As a result, the sacred cow has become more than just another animal. She becomes untouchable. Even if there's starvation in the camp, people would rather die than kill the sacred cow. Because of her track record, a lot of other cows revere the grass where she grazes. Any cow that suggests grazing elsewhere gets ignored or even condemned. "We've always grazed there," they say. "This has always been the best grass for grazing. How can it be any better somewhere else?" Regrettably, the sacred cow knows only one way. Although she's been right for a long time, lately she hasn't followed the weather patterns to know that the watering hole has dried up. She simply keeps going back, expecting the water to be there. Neither she nor the rest of the herd will discover this until it's too late. The consequences could be tragic. In a sense, the sacred cow stampedes the herd into believing her. It may not be a full-out run, but it's just as dangerous because it's not readily apparent. Regardless, it still could be deadly to a lot of cows, mostly the weak ones and the newborns. Not keeping up with what's happening around her often leads to a sad ending for the sacred cow. What's sadder is that her lack of foresight can endanger other cows in the herd. Some may even die. The road taken by the sacred cow can often be strewn with carcasses of dead cows. Another stampeder is the bull-headed cow. She acts more like a bull than a cow. She swaggers like a bull and throws her weight around like a bull, but she's only a cow. She doesn't like to follow anyone. she'll often wander off because she'd rather blaze a trail of her own. Yet time after time, the cowboy brings the bull-headed cow back to the herd, regardless of how many times she strays. Regrettably, the bull-headed cow often leads other cows along on her meanderings. Many times the bull-headed cow and her pals get lost, disrupting the schedule of the drive. On their selfish pursuits, one day this cow will get herself and her friends in trouble. She'll separate from the rest of the herd and run into a pack of hungry wolves that will attack when she's weak and alone. No cowboy will be around to save her then. But that's what she gets for being so bullheaded. Then there comes the really smart cow. This cow knows more than the cowboy and will challenge cowboy's authority. And because of force of personality, other cows will follow this smart cow. And this is another kind of stampede that will often split the herd. The smart cow knows nothing about nurturing the other cows, just herself. Ironically, all three types of cow are part of the same drive and the same herd. The sacred cow lives in the past and as a result forfeits the future. The bull-headed cow doesn't care about the past or the future and lives for the present. And the smart cow's focus is always on itself. They're all so different, yet similar. Jesus warned us about following the other cows rather than the cowboy. And he had stern words for those cows in the herd that lead other cows astray. In Matthew 18:6, Jesus said it would be better for someone to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be thrown into the sea than to cause one of his children to go astray. That's pretty powerful. Jesus also says in Matthew 11:30 that when we take his yoke upon us, it's easy and light. Cows often will get these heavy yokes put on them to enable them to do heavy work. Not so with Jesus. Let's see what he promises. Matthew 11:28 and 29.
Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls.
We might want to look at the herd we're hanging with. Don't let the sacred cow or the bull-headed cow or the smart cow lead you apart from Jesus to follow them. They're not interested in getting you to the water hole. Rather, they're interested in doing their own thing, which is usually not in our best interest. Remember, there may be wolves out there waiting for just the right time to pounce on an unsuspecting cow. Anyone for a steak dinner? Next time, we're going to talk about God, gardens, and green zones. It gets better and better. I like the analogy about the cows. I grew up working on farms and baling hay, and so a lot of what he was saying there brought back some fond memories of when I was young and strong and could work all day and play all night. But I think the lessons that he is alluding to with those analogies are good. And so once again, our purpose in studying this is to realize where we are today in our culture and how to act as Christians in that culture that sets us apart from the rest of the world. Let's pray. Father, thank you again for Joe. Love his heart, love his explanations, love his challenges. Help us to continue to receive them with an open mind, an open heart, and apply the ones that apply to us so that we may help to advance your kingdom. Amen.